Good evening, everybody. It's Friday night here on the West Coast. I'm down here in Southern California. I'm Bob for the Vitality Project, and our guest tonight is Angela MacLeod, and she's up the coast away. She's in the Pacific Northwest. So it's
That's
nice
right.
to have you here. Yeah. I'm hoping that both of us are managing with the awful fires that are going on in our
Yeah.
respective states right now. It's been a challenging time. I was thinking about our conversation earlier, is that I can feel it this afternoon. My throat is feeling the effects of this. I
Yeah.
read yesterday in the newspaper that it was the worst smog in the Los Angeles area in 30 years. And I
Wow.
believe it. It's
Wow.
really unhealthy. And then I have a friend in Oregon that wrote me that unhealthy smog has a certain particulate level. I don't know what the percentage is,
Uh-huh.
and that it's way over that, right
Yeah.
now in Oregon. And I can imagine where you are in Washington as well.
It's high here too.
Yeah. I've got some water, some herbal tea I'm drinking to keep my throat loose, and so please forgive me if I
Well,
sip from time to time.
fine. Yeah.
It's trying to kind of manage with the environment right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I have some water too.
I've been noticing that I've been needing to drink more water the last week or two.
Uh-huh.
Angela, you and I are in a conversation ourselves and have been for years now. And you've developed considerable, several areas of deep expertise. And I continue to study myself both personally and professionally, looking at what we can do to manage what for so many people triggers cravings that are addictive in nature, whether it's to a drug or to some kind of compulsive behavior that ends up not serving ultimately. And so I know it's a lot of your commitment on multiple domains, and it's my wish also. And we've been looking at this week in our daily posts, looking at two different systems. And I use a certain vocabulary, and you use a certain vocabulary, or I should say vocabularies, because I think it's plural for both of us.
Uh-huh.
But we've been talking about how it is that when we can move from what I'm calling red alert mode, which is highly correlated with addictive cravings and, in fact, relapse behavior, when we can move skillfully towards what I'm referring to as resting brain or resting mode, is that it opens us up into resilience to stress. And as we wrote about today in the post, and it was a video post that we did, that there's not some illusion that stress goes away. It doesn't go away for you. It doesn't go away for me. But I think you and I both have had a living firsthand experience that there are intervening variables that if we add them to the mix, specifically various forms of centering or grounding ourselves, relaxing ourselves, moving from that red alert to the resting modes, that it can make a huge difference in terms of moving what I've started to think of as moving from stress to distress. I think that stress is inevitable, but I've come to feel pretty strongly, owing to the skills that you and I both encourage in the work that we do, that distress is not inevitable. It's not to say that sometimes we face incredible stress, but if we can develop skillful means that we can actually build resilience skills, and it can give us a real leg up in terms of not going over the waterfall into distress. And so that's really the centerpiece of our conversation all week long. And our topic tonight is how to expand your capacity to manage stress. I used an analogy of a beaker or a pitcher of water, and it stands to reason, and somebody can try this on their own. I've got some baking cups of various sizes in the kitchen, measuring cups. And if I fill a 12-ounce measuring cup with water and then put 1 more ounce in it, it spills over the edge. I can pour that same amount, let's say 12 plus ounces, into a 24-ounce container, and it doesn't come close to the top of the container. In fact, there's a lot of space for more liquid. And so I've been using that liquid or water analogy as kind of like how we would think of stress. And if we can build a more capacity, let's say, that we can actually weather the storm of stress much more resiliently. So with that kind of as a prelude, I'd love to pick your brain, your heart, any suggestions. I know you care deeply about this, and I'm really grateful you're here, Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here with you. Yeah. This is a topic that's really at the center of my life in a lot of ways, partly partly because of my own history with addiction, and in my recovery, finding that this is one of the key things for me in terms of preventing relapse, is finding new ways to expand my capacity to respond healthfully, skillfully to the stresses of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I've been really excited to learn more about how the nervous system works and the different ways that we can work with our nervous system as an inroad to that.
Yes.
One of the things I noticed, I'm just using some of my own experiences, I have used walking as an exercise for a lot of my life. I've used a lot of different things, but that's often been, even in the middle of depression, that I have continued to walk, just because I noticed that I would feel a little bit more grounded after walking, getting some fresh air. But I also noticed that when I look back over my life, that really wasn't enough for me to build a resilient baseline in terms of stress. Like, it could be, I almost see it as like, it would be like a first aid response. And if I had time, when I'm feeling really stressed, to go on a walk. And I still use walking as a way of kind of moving that energy in my body that can start to get wound up. And so one of the things I've been very curious about is this idea of a combination of different elements, or a constellation, combination of different elements that together actually really increase my resilience, or my capacity to deal with stress. So for me, and the research also shows this, that movement is often a way to do that, all kinds of movement, but being aware while you're moving. So mindful movement is part of that. And then another element being breath. So I've often found myself out on a walk, but not actually breathing very much. So this idea of consciously combining a number of elements, and even adding into that, what is my attitude? What kind of thoughts, positive direction do I want to take my energy right now? Not so much to avoid, anything that's negative or difficult, but as more of the idea of building resilience is oftentimes, for me, it takes a choice to focus on gratitude, what is going well, because my default mode is to be always watching for what's wrong, what's happening, it's sort of automatic. So I find, just in a general way, finding a way to combine those kind of elements of attention and movement and breath with a positive attitude, and then practicing regularly, has made a huge difference in building that capacity, or expanding that container to respond differently to stress.
Really, I want to respond and encourage you to continue on. Really like what you're saying, and you're actually kind of prefiguring where we're going next. I started off these first couple of weeks as we move into really looking at, I think of it as advanced recovery. And it's not meant to be rarefied or elitist. It's just that I think early recovery requires getting sober, and that's a huge task. And I think it's a huge accomplishment. Anybody I just led a group yesterday with a woman that was celebrating the first several weeks of being sober, and I really feel proud of her, and I really want to celebrate that with her. I think that's a huge achievement, and you and I both know what that's like in terms of early recovery, just being able to get sober. But what I'm interested in more in this next period of time, and I'm thinking of this as the next phase of work here at your Vitality Project, is deepening that in terms of, and you're touching on it beautifully right now, Angela, deepening into what I think of as a second phase of recovery, which I'm calling advanced recovery. And the goal of this is, once I've gotten sober, how do I sustain that? And I think the good news is that tools like you're suggesting that will help us to protect our sobriety, or prevent relapse, to put it in that language, they actually enrich our lives. I mean, the good news about it is the payoff is that once I've gotten sober and can begin to practice mindful awareness, whether it's movement or a conversation with a friend or how I'm eating, And also, like you're saying, monitoring my attitudes and beginning to increase for me to focus consciously on gratitude as a daily practice. I like how I feel when I feel gratitude in my life. And so it's like, it's those kinds of things. You and I have also talked a lot about forgiveness practice as another example. Learning how to forgive myself, and when appropriate to forgive others, has enriched my life incredibly. And so they become a reward in and of themselves. It's like it's not like a means to an end. I like how it feels to be grateful. I like how it feels to have self-compassion. And we can practice these things. And yes, they do correlate with our sustaining our sobriety or recovery. And so what we've been looking at these few weeks is kind of a body-oriented practice. It's a very simple practice, mindfulness of the breath. And anybody that hasn't seen those posts in the last let's say the last couple of weeks, I encourage you back, because we actually very specific about it. I tried to pick the very simplest practice.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more, and you bring a lot more to that, Angela. I also appreciate your introducing, I think, more of what I think of as the mental or attitudinal domain, our cognitive faculties, because I feel like that combination, that's why we're calling this mind-body tools. This unit is mind-body tools for advanced recovery. And I literally think of it as mind and body as inseparable. And so, yes, let's learn how to center and ground and relax and be mindful with our bodies. And let's do the very same thing with our minds, and then see what happens when we put those two huge force fields together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Something I wanted to bring in too is, again, from my own experience, that when I may have shared this in one of our Facebook Lives, I can't remember, about my very, very early in recovery this last time around. I had a fair amount of understanding that mindfulness would be really important for me. And I have done a lot of different, sort of sampled and experimented with different types of mindfulness, but I found it really difficult to sit down, even for a few minutes, to just be aware of my breath. And really what happened for me, at least early in recovery, and even not just the first few weeks, but even months, is that I would feel a flooding of basically different kinds of emotions. Sometimes it would be things like self-loathing, or just all of the regret and all of the pain of loss. And so in a way, mindfulness is beautiful in the sense that it can really show us what there is to work with, what we have to work on in healing. But there's also sort of maybe stages, or there's a way to approach it that could be kind and gentle and maybe paced. And that's, of course, going to be different for everyone. And I found for me, well, I could sit in meditation in a group setting. So that gave me a clue that there was something about being in a relational field or a sense of connection that helped me be able to tolerate some of that discomfort. And then the other thing for me, and this is just my own example, and other people will have their own versions, was finding my entry into mindfulness is through movement. And then also slowing the movement down to stillness. And so one of the beauties for me is in studying the nervous system, finding that actually when we slow down our movement, that also correlates with the mind coming to more of a restful place. And so it's not even so much like when I would sit down to meditate previous to this understanding, I didn't really realize how my mind was just churning, and I couldn't will it to slow down. I couldn't do that. But through movement and through breath, that then my mind was invited to relax and slow down. So sometimes I think of this as portals toward mindfulness or toward stillness or rest, like a portal or a gateway. And I'm really excited about, the idea that if once people get this sense that they could experiment and find their portal to this stillness or this resting mind.
Yeah.
And see that I don't want to go on to see, I have another thought that's coming, but I want to just pause there and see if you had anything to add to that.
I just love to reinforce what you're saying and encourage you to continue. I'll tell you what came to my mind. I really like what you're saying. For anybody that doesn't know this, among other things, Angela is a lifelong dancer at the highest level. And I've drummed my entire life. And as you were talking, what came up spontaneously for me, probably not surprising to you, dear Angela, was a drumming image, is that many drummers, when they solo, will go from playing less complexity towards more complexity and less volume towards more volume. And that's wonderfully, kind of climactic. And I certainly have done that and will continue to do that. But another move that I really enjoy doing as a musician, as a drummer, I play primarily in the idiom of jazz, so it allows for improvisation, is that when I'm given a drum solo, I like to actually start loud and move to quiet, move to silence. There's something about that move. So it'd be technically be called a decrescendo. And I also really like slowing down.
Sorry about the phone. I forgot it was in here.
That's okay.
And my partner is going to probably catch that. Yeah.
That's okay.
We're waiting for the vet. The vet is going to call back.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, there's no need to apologize. I know it's a big deal today.
9, 3, 4, 5, 8, 8.
We'll give it just a second. It's
yeah.
fine.
There we go. I think it's done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Angela has a dear cat that's ill right now, and I feel like this is real life. I mean, it's really what we're talking about. We're talking about stress, and it's omnipresent. We don't right now. It's your cat. Another moment, it might be something in my life, and so I just as soon honor it by pausing for a second, just honoring this is our lives. Yeah. I really feel that way. This idea of slowing down consciously or intentionally, I like very much the feeling, and it oftentimes I like how it feels to do that as a drummer, to move things down and to slow down the tempo. And I like how it feels in my body. It would be like you dancing to something like that. I also have observed that it can really catch an audience by surprise. They're not used to that. I think particularly with drums. Drums are associated with kind of volume. And so I've done that before. I don't do anything kind of in a technique-y way, but I've finished a drum solo and you could literally hear a pin drop. It's like it just takes your breath away. And that's kind of the point, is to kind of surprise ourselves, mix it up a bit.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what I would encourage people to do, is to experiment. A friend of mine told me some time ago, when we were talking about healing and on dealing with a lot in our lives, and she was studying psychology, and she said that don't wait until you're in a crisis to try to figure out how to manage it. When you're feeling relatively balanced or calm, you might think, oh, okay, things are fine, I don't need to do anything. But she was emphasizing how actually that's a part of our resilience, is when we have those times of being relatively calm and balanced. And that's also a good time to experiment with ways to, so for example, I might decide to start doing yoga or some practice, and as a part of my way of building more resilience. And as with a lot of exercises and even playing music or anything, you don't wait till the performance to pull out your instrument and jump on stage. You actually spend a lot of time practicing, and then you're ready for the performance. And so the other part of this that I feel like is wonderful to emphasize is that it's in the actual doing of these practices. So some of these things that build resilience are extremely simple. Long, slow exhalations, or just sitting, observing your breath. And I think in our culture, we go into our heads and we try to figure out solutions when we're stressed. And that's not the best time usually to access our best thinking. And so if we can kind of change to, or just adapt the idea of exploring different ways of building resilience that we really enjoy. And when we're feeling pretty calm, and have that be even a daily practice, that you would be surprised, if you haven't done this already, that when you're in that stressful situation and the red flags are going off and the red flag brain is in motion, there's a good chance that some of those practices might come into play automatically because you've already been practicing them.
That's good. Yeah.
And so don't be fooled by simplicity. That if something is simple, that doesn't mean that it's not effective.
There's such a synchronicity. When as you began talking, I looked down here on my phone. I have this morning quiet time in which I read, and one of the things I've been reading this last year is every morning I study the Christian devotional author Oswald Chambers, his book My Utmost for His Highest. And this morning's reading, I mean, it couldn't be any better timed. This is exactly his point this morning, and he's putting it in a Christian context, but it need not be confined to just that. It's really what we're talking about in terms of living your life. And he was talking about the Christian that would wait until crisis to say, then I'll call on God for help, or then I'll pray. You just watch and see, And what Oswald Chambers is saying, he lived 100 years ago. What he's saying is that, no, it's just exactly your point. It's funny, the whole reading today was about this, and then you're speaking to it. I smiled as you were talking. I couldn't agree more. Is the time to practice this and to build this is when the waters are calm, so that we have this as an access that it's accessible. I also liked very much your languaging of it. That I'm looking at my books, and I have any number of books on so-called relapse prevention, and that's really what psychology calls in some ways what we're talking about. But I actually prefer to substitute a different terminology. I'd rather talk about resilient skills building. That we're building positive skills. It's not about preventing something, that's true. But you're building a life that can move through stress of what you're going through right now with your kitty, or whatever life brings us tomorrow, and so on. Is that we're building skills for a fulfilling life. It's actually the moniker of this initiative here. Your Vitality Project was named for the simple reason that I think that you and I and most anybody that's been able to get sober, it's kind of like, what's next? Well, we're talking about what's next. It's resilience or vitality, different words for it, fulfillment, robustness. But it's like to live the life that we really hunger and desire to live. And so we're talking about skills pursuant to that. So why would we wait till there was this term that was used in World War I, a foxhole religion. People find religion when bombs are dropping, literally when they're in a foxhole. And that's okay. But we're talking about finding so-called religion, finding resources in your day-to-day practice, so that you get to where they're almost second nature. They're like a reflex. This is a dancer, and I know this is a drummer, is that when I'm drumming live in a jazz context with everything going on, I'm not thinking. My practicing that I've done for my whole life is just accessible. I don't have to think about it. I'd have to go, well, I better work out that thing. It's there. But that's only because of practice. And then I can enjoy. Enjoy the music. It's pure bliss for me.
I'm watching you play music. You look like you're in pure bliss. You look very.
I am. Thank you. And I've seen you dance, and I return the compliment, my dear. We should wrap up in just a minute, but I want to give any final words to you, Angela. Any final parting thoughts that you might have? Yeah.
Well, I really like the process that you created, the very simple process in the last couple of posts about, writing down the topic that's difficult for you, a challenging topic, doing a 5-minute observing the breath, mindfulness of the breath, and then, checking in with your feeling level, noticing what's going on, and then sort of proactively or strategically choosing your response. And I think that's a really beautiful, that fits right in with what we're saying too, that if that became a regular practice, and you can even practice on little things, you know, like when I was doing I was following the exercise, I picked something really hard, you know, and then I thought, okay, wait a minute, I think I'm going to try something really small, you know, just to kind of get a feel for this. And because actually what happened for me on the big issue was that I kind of spent a lot of time in the feelings. I realized, oh, there's a lot here, you know, that's really difficult for me. And I didn't even get to the strategy part or the action part. Unless the action really, in a way, I guess I did. The action was, oh, I realized that I have some stuff here that I need some help with. You know, that's the action, is I'm willing to do that.
Yeah.
But then again, that idea of building resilience can be picking a practice like what you outlined, that you offered, and then practicing, say, on small things first.
Yeah.
And just doing it over and over again, and you know, you'll see, I'm just sure how that will come up in the next difficult conversation. Something might come up from these practices that will take it on a different track than the usual old track.
I used to have on my screen, as a screensaver on my computer, a picture of the Matterhorn in Switzerland. I was always quite taken by that as a little boy. I read several books, stories about people climbing the Matterhorn. Who knows where this stuff comes from? I grew up in Central California. There was no Matterhorn anywhere, but I had a screensaver on my computer of the Matterhorn, and underneath it was this simple little phrase. I think I'm getting close to it. I may not get it quite exactly right, but it was something like, accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. You know? And that image of the Matterhorn is just like one step at a time, you know, whether it's climbing a mountain or moving through, like you were suggesting, sometimes some mega stressors really require breaking them down into smaller pieces because they're just overwhelming. But we're talking about finding some ways that will make that easier. And there'll be more of this. I love this conversation, and knowing that it's going to extend. I want to say something, and that is, just today, you and I were talking about this, and I really want to kind of put this out there as a teaser. We're looking towards doing a collaborative workshop, hopefully in the next weeks, maybe in the month of October. We'll see how the timing goes out. A collaborative workshop where we can actually provide a couple of hours of more in-depth, not only conversation, but practice of all that we're talking about. And I really, really look forward to that with you, Angela. Yeah, I look forward to it too. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again for joining me and us tonight. It's a real blessing to have you with us. Thank you, Angela. It's wonderful to be with you too. Thank you. Thank you. I wish you a good weekend, okay? And everybody else who was with us tonight, thank you all for joining us. I'll see you again soon, Angela, and hope everybody will continue to come back. We'll be back. We won't be back together next Friday because I'll be out of town, you and I. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. But I'll see you next week for sure. Yep. Okay. Okay. Much love to you. Bye-bye, everybody. Good night, everybody.